All right, reflection number 3. I was wrong in the last video. This is it. This seminar was called Beyond Social Media, Utilizing Digital Meme Culture for Literary and Text Analysis. A lot of this, first of all, this was a presentation kind of sponsored by a professor, I believe, from Michigan State, but really facilitated, carried out in its majority by his students, I believe undergrad and graduate students. This one was fascinating. I thought it was really cool. Basically, they went through and talked about the history of memes, which they claimed existed in some form since 1976, but obviously the internet has kind of popularized them. They talked about how memes are often political in nature, and they also just talked about general breaking down the text of memes, and somewhat contradicting, not really contradicting my thoughts on the art integration seminar from earlier, but actually proving it is that when you're breaking down something like a meme, that requires some verbal work, some essay work, and so I wouldn't want a meme, for example, to be a final project, but it's certainly a good bridge and helps students start to see the depth within the text that they create. And that's one thing that was brought up, is helping students through this project of meme creation to not only be content consumers and processors, taking work that other people have done and dissecting it and seeing why they're making certain, argumentative moves or narrative moves, but actually creating content and going through sort of the meta process of breaking down what they want to say beforehand and then creating a product that feeds into all those subtleties. Sort of like essay writing, but on a much different, in a much different context. So they broke down the characteristics of memes along 3 lines, in 3 categories. They talked about content, which is specifically the information that's shared, but it does include the connotation and denotation. The form, which is the physical aspects of the meme. So what is the text placement, what picture is there, and how do those things affect what's being said? And the stance is, what is it saying and who has access? Specifically, I don't really have a lot to share on that specific example, just that it's interesting to see how these 3 things interact. So for example, if you had a meme and you place text at the top and the bottom of the meme, it may suggest that the picture is the reaction or the central point between the text, meaning that the picture and the text work together, whereas if the text was over top of a picture, it may imply that the wording is more important than the picture being communicated, or maybe even kind of a juxtaposition being created there, saying that the words and the picture are telling a different story from each other and kind of competing, but the text is one. Just different formatting things. Bolder text is probably a more loud seeming message than other text. Different things like that. Very subtle moves, but they really broke down memes in a way where, depending on how you form them, they really do have an argumentative quality that it seems obvious in the age of social media that memes are used pretty consistently, and they certainly do have an argumentative quality. They have a purpose, but a lot of times we use them online, in a humorous way, whereas I think what was being done here is saying that they actually have classroom application and giving students practice on how to break down text, how to look for the implicit, and how to share exactly what they believe is being said, both explicitly and implicitly by a particular text. And so, and by being content creators, they're thinking about it on the flip side is how, what do I want to communicate both explicitly and implicitly with the content that I'm creating. So they suggested a particular activity that was just kind of a meme creation in relation to the Crucible, and there was sort of a rubric based on identification of themes, critical thinking, pairing of image and text, creativity. I'm not a huge fan of the meme, but I do like the activity because I think it could be a scaffold between, as I've already shared, a scaffold towards sort of the deep analysis needed in an essay, especially if it's an argumentative essay. I think that creating a meme and then maybe breaking down another group's meme for exactly what it says could be helpful in learning how to break down quotes. Certainly this is thinking along visual lines as opposed to the written word, so obviously it's a little bit different, but I think it's offering students an extra opportunity to kind of go through the same mental process and to certainly kind of put to use their literary interpretation, critical thinking skills to see what is really being said to them by such a small thing. And that's another point, is that, in essays, a small quote in congruence with the other aspects of a certain character's personality really can have a different connotation based on who the character is presented as opposed to just taking the quote at face value. And that one line of text could mean a whole lot depending on the context and depending on, who says what. And I think breaking down something as small as a meme in depth could be good practice at breaking down such a small quote and looking for the deeper meaning therein. So I certainly see this as a valuable activity, as a scaffold. I wouldn't use it as a summative assessment, more formative assessment. But also it's just fascinating to learn about the history of memes, and it was also just a really fun presentation. Overall, the MCT experience is something that I'd certainly go for again. We all had a good time and learned a lot. Hopefully that shines through in, I guess, my own analysis and my own thoughts reflecting on those experiences, those 3 seminars we attended. It was certainly a fun day, and thank you for suggesting that experience. All right, thanks for listening to all my reflections. Happy grading, sir.